Your feet, your ankles, your knees, and your thighs, you don't think about them until they're not working so well anymore. So this series can be matched with many of our other series to create a longer practice. In specific, these are excellent poses to use for ultimately meditation, but before, after activities like running, biking, playing outdoors, excellent preparation and cool down poses. The poses that we're about to do can be very challenging for some people in their knees, so let's modify each pose. Close listening to your body and responding with the appropriate props can make it very doable for many people, even including those who have had some knee surgery. So Julie, will you come forward like you're moving into tabletop position? You'll need a few props handy. Some hand towels from the bathroom will work quite well. Fold the hand towel so you essentially make a strip with it. And then take the strip of hand towel and tuck it deep into your knee joints. This could feel good even if you don't have knee problems. What this in effect does is keeps the joint of your knee open, a little more space. And we're going to work with your knees together or an inch or two apart, but not wider than your hips. Feet pointing straight back rather than out to the side, and wide with your heels. So there's some space to bring your hips to the floor in between your feet. Now, some of you already might be thinking, there's no way that I'm getting my hips to the floor. That's where we'll need some blocks. If you don't have yoga props, just use some books from around the house. You can stack the props 1 or even 2 deep, a third if your knees are really troublesome, and then sit your hips back. Notice I've kept the blocks long, so there's room for all of her pelvis to sit on the blocks. And then you can sit up tall, Julie. This pose is called hero pose. So this is our more modified version of the pose with the towels beneath the creases of her knees and the blocks stacked very high. She's working with her knees even somewhat wide apart. Now, much less modified, let's look at that option too. Will you lean forward into your hands, Julie? Julie doesn't really need to work with the towels or the blocks. She's more flexible than that. So Julie, now you can sit your hips to the floor between your feet, and she works with her knees together. You would always want to modify if you feel inclined to lift your knees up. So that's not an option. Knees have to stay on the mat. You do not want your knees to go wider than your hips. So Julie's able to sit very comfortably with her hips on the floor. You then have an option to use your palms or your fists pressing in to the sole of your foot and out to the baby toe edge. That will help to align your ankles, your shins, and your knees. When you're taking this pose, sit up very tall in your spine, wide collarbones, even press your head up and back. You can hold the pose right here and breathe. Or if you're sitting on the floor very comfortably with no prop under your hips, you also have the option to recline. The first step is to lean back one hand at a time. The second step is to lean back one forearm or elbow at a time. At any point where you feel your knees lift up, you've gone a little too far, backtrack to the previous step. The final step is to recline all the way onto your shoulders. If you can relax the whole way down, then your work is to melt your ribs down as you breathe. Not to worry if you're sitting propped up on several blocks with towels behind your knees. It doesn't mean that Julie's having a better practice than what you're having. It just meant that it took a little bit more stimulation for her to get the stretch you get right away. To come back up from the floor, go up the same way you went down. So one elbow at a time, one hand at a time, and come up. And then for everyone, whichever stage of the pose you're in, lean forward into a tabletop position and stretch your legs behind you one at a time to release your knees and your ankles. Now we're going to build on that hero pose with a toes pose. So staying on your knees, turn your toes under as deeply as you're able to. Let's pull Julie's pant leg away from her ankle so you can really see that she's folding her toes under even to her baby toes. That might be enough of a stretch for some of you. Others, you'll be able to stand up on your knees. Ultimately, what we're looking for is that you're able to keep your toes turned under and sit your hips back to your heels. Now, you may at first feel as though your toes are made of glass. Do your best with your breathing to relax and bring ease into your toes. Finally, we'll add an arm bind. So Julie, you can reach your right arm overhead and down your back. You might need to hold a strap. A hand towel will work. And then your left arm can reach up your back, holding hands or holding the strap. Finally, as you hold the pose, melt your ribs in so your torso is sitting straight on top of your hips. You might need to take a break from time to time as you hold the pose and stand up on your knees. If you're able to, stay seated back down onto your heels. Try to hold this for 10 breaths. After your 10th breath, you'll switch the sides of your arms. So you could come up to your knees, release your arms, and switch sides. Reach your left arm overhead and down your back. Maybe you'll need the strap. Some of you will be able to hold hand to hand. Gather the strap. Melt your ribs into your body and sit your hips back to your heels. 5 to 10 breaths on this side, whatever you held on the other side. What can you do in your thinking, in your attitude, and in your breathing to relax about the sensation you're experiencing in your toes? Having feet that are stretched out, malleable, and at ease will make the whole of your body feel much better. After your 10th breath, you can come up out of this pose, up to your knees, release your arms, lean forward with your hands on the ground like tabletop, and point your toes behind you. Keep your feet stretched back like this. You can bring your legs together, knees together, feet together. Now sit your hips back to your heels. Some of you, this will be far enough back. You might even still be leaning a little forward on your hands, but for the rest of you, lean back to your hands behind you. This might be far enough. The last step is to lift your knees straight up and stretch the tops of your ankles. Hold it for 3 or 5 breaths, then gently bring your knees down. Hands to the floor, tabletop, stretch your legs out one at a time behind you. With daily practice, stretching out your toes, your ankles, your knees, your thighs, you'll find much relief in those parts of your body, and you may even realize a result in your lower back.